So, Steve, I know that you are a bit of a connoisseur of the retro video game systems from the '90s, if you will. Specifically of the SNES and Sega Genesis. Can you tell me your history with either one without telling me which one you prefer?
Yeah, so I'm old, and that means that I owned both of these when they came out. My mom and dad were fortunate enough to be able to afford them when I was a kid, so I got the Sega Genesis first, because we were like a Sega house as kids. And this was when I was like in third or fourth grade or something like that. That, again, very old. But, I started getting EGM, and I noticed, they started putting out rumors about the Super Nintendo. Like, oh, Nintendo's going to release a follow-up to the NES. And being a kid with a Sega in your house, you're instantly like a social pariah. Like, everyone's like, you have a what? You played what? And so... I was like, I got the new Sega, and everyone's like, great, that's great for you. And so when I hit my mom up, and I was like, you got to get me the new Nintendo. I was like, I got to play Mario, whatever it is. Like, I need this so that I can.
You were a Mario guy.
I was a.
You were a Mario guy. Oof. That's embarrassing. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, there was no one on the internet to correct me back then. But we ended up getting a Super Nintendo probably a couple years after it came out, and my dad, in his infinite wisdom, was like, I got you the game every kid wants to play. Populous. And so my very first SNES game was Populous, and I played it out of sheer desire to just play anything on a Super Nintendo. Later on my collection branched out, and I rented Super Mario World from Blockbuster and played all the hits with it. But I was there in the contemporary conversations. Like, I was on the playground arguing the merits of both of these consoles with kids in my class, and it was heated. It wasn't like it is now, where you could just hop on a message board and drop a hot take and leave. Like, you had to look someone in the eye while you said these things, and it definitely led to a lot of debate. But I would say it was a fun time to be able to say that I was there, and I was part of things. I used to see all the smack talking commercials from Sega, and see Nintendo's kind of non-responses in them, and it was definitely a good time to be alive and to play these consoles. And I'll never forget the rush of getting a good report card and showing my mom and being like, let me go to Toys R Us and pick a slip out of a thing and give it to the person. But yeah, these were both just really great consoles. I love them both. I'm not going to give away my favorite, but I definitely have very strong memories of playing each of these.
Yeah, I'm the same. Even though I'm much younger, I'm roughly 12, and I grew up with the Sega Genesis though as a hand-me-down console. It was one of my cousins. I got a Model 2 Sega Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog, and I played that very consistently. I couldn't get past Marble Zone. This was around the early 2000s, and I eventually got two other Sega Genesis games in the form of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Miss Pac-Man. So that was pretty much it for the Sega Genesis. But Super Nintendo, I experienced at my neighbor's house, strangely enough. They had a Super Nintendo. And I also experienced a lot of it through Game Boy Advance games with a lot of the ports that came out on that system. You got pretty much, Super Mario World and all the All-Stars versions of the original few games alongside Yoshi's Island. You had Link to the Past, Donkey Kong Country. There was a ton of Super Nintendo stuff available on the Game Boy Advance, and it was really, really cool to get those console quality games in the palm of your hands back then. It's still cool now with the Switch, but especially back then when you had these systems that were notoriously underpowered. They were specifically underpowered, and they had such pixelated screens and whatnot. It was still really cool to see console games come to the 3DS. I remember even playing Shovel Knight on the 3DS when I primarily played that on console, and just seeing that on that screen, it's really cool. And I think that was one of the really awesome things about that Game Boy Advance era. But I ended up playing a lot more on the Wii Virtual Console, just because pretty much most of the heavy hitters came out on there. I played Super Mario RPG and A Link to the Past that way. But yeah, so I got my own experience in with both of these systems. I think I'm warranted enough to be in this debate here.
Yeah.
So I have wheeldecide.com pulled
Oh,
up
boy.
here. Now I don't think it's fun for us to just say like, oh, what's our favorite? Because I feel like there's a chance that we'll both have the same favorite. So I feel like it's more fun if we get stuck with something we don't care about at all, and we have to defend the legacy of it. So I have this Wheel Decide pulled up here with Genesis and Super Nintendo on it. So I'm gonna spin it, and then I'm gonna tell you what I get, which automatically means what you get, because it's a two-way thing.
All right.
And after we're done, we're gonna do this for about 20 minutes or so, and then we are going to reveal what our true favorite is. And even if we don't really realize what our true favorite is right now, I feel like defending the legacy of something and realizing like, oh man, this system actually kind of sucked. That might help out. So I'm gonna click it right here. Let's see what I get. All right, I got Super Nintendo.
Ooh, nice.
That means you get Sega Genesis. All right, so let's see. I mean, like maybe we should start with just a full-on, basically kind of like almost like a filibuster kind of thing, or just like first statements. Maybe like if it's a trial, and pretty much say why you think your system is better. Should we, do you want to go first or should I go first? What do you think?
I think I'll go first. The Sega Genesis did come out first, so
All right, that is fair.
yeah. So the Sega
And you can go out for blood here. You don't have to be nice. You don't have to be nice. We were given these to defend, so
right.
you can just say why this system is horrible. My system is horrible, and how your games are better and why they're better and whatnot. So so give it to me. Give it to me straight here.
All right. First off, the Sega Genesis released in 1989. I want to be clear. It beat the Super NES to the market. I want to say by 2 years, if not somewhere around there. I think the SNES came out in America in 91. I want to say. I think we got the Genesis in like summer of 89. So Sega had like a 2-year lead on Nintendo with this thing, and it slapped. Like when it came out, you got, okay, Altered Beast was not like a game that anybody remembers fondly.
I already know I'm gonna win this one.
2022.
You're already defending Altered Beast.
But let's hear me out though. Hear me out. I have the benefit of having lived in this era, and Altered Beast was
That's ageist.
mind-blowing.
That's ageist. I'm not gonna stand for this kind of stuff. All right, but go on.
Listen,
Go on. Let's hear what you have to say.
You had to have been there. It gives you valuable context. Like no
Fine.
game on consoles at the time looked nearly as good as the Genesis's pack-in title. It was ridiculous to see. It was a technical showcase at the time that it released. Like you had the NES and the Sega Master System, and then this, and it was a visual leap beyond anything that we could have imagined. This was as close to Arcade Perfect as anyone had gotten at this point. Like back when Arcade Perfect was even a term that people could use. I mean, what did we get with the Super Nintendo? You got another Mario game. They had like the map from Mario 3, and they replaced the objectively better Tanuki suit with a cape that comes out of a feather. I mean, come on. Mario can run on a wall. Wow. Inspiring. They had everything was named after food, donut, vanilla. Like I just, all I'm saying is I'm not saying all
Sega published a game called McDonald's Treasureland Adventures. All right, I don't want to hear any of this garbage.
Listen,
Go on.
sometimes you got to grab the bag. All right, you need that money so you can
fair.
produce your Sonics and your Fantasy Stars.
SNES had cool spot as well. Chester Cheetah, Too Cool to Fool. Maybe that might have been also on Genesis too. I don't remember. But
Probably.
there's
I'm
a lot.
just saying, the Genesis was very much a product of its time, and they weren't content to wait for Nintendo to make a move. They came out aggressively, and the sales actually bore that out. Like the Genesis made Nintendo sweat. Like it was a very close race. These consoles sold very close to each other, and Sega actually released a CD add-on for this thing. So you actually got some CD-based games, whereas Nintendo literally birthed their worst competitor, their greatest rival, out of their desire for a CD add-on, which never came out. What do we get? The Saddle of You?
Well, we didn't get that. So that's talking about Mega Drive versus Super Famicom first off. So that's completely not even relevant to the conversation.
Well, in that case, then you got nothing versus the Sega CD.
There was the Super Game Boy.
The Super
Suck
Game
it.
Boy. Well, I had the Master System adapter. I could play all my Master System games.
Power-based converter.
Yeah, the power-based converter.
You cheeky. But keep going on. I don't wanna interrupt you. If you know when you're done with your debate, just put it down like that. But if you have more to say, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
The Genesis, first off, it had the uncensored version of Mortal Kombat, which was the one you bought. If you were a kid back then, you bought the uncensored version of Mortal Kombat. You had Gunstar Heroes, which was incredible. Treasure was doing amazing things on the Genesis. Vector Man was another game that you just couldn't wrap your head around how it worked. Sonic 1, 2, and 3 are like classics. Some of the best games of all time. Phantasy Star 4 is easily better than 99% of SNES RPGs that released during the 16-bit era. I would put it up there with Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, among the best of all time. I think that the Genesis was, it was a amazing console. Like, it had an amazing library of games that I just could not. I mean, I'm not even touching on like Streets of Rage, which isn't my thing, but a lot of people love that series. You could get just about any fighting game on there. Once they released the 6-button pad, I mean, Street Fighter was completely serviceable on the console. And it was what, like $100 cheaper most of its life than the SNES was. I think personally, I know you know what I'm talking about as a Sega kid, Scott. This is one of, like, Sega was at their peak, arguably, with the Genesis. They almost toppled Nintendo with this. I feel like if they had marketed the console a bit smarter outside of the US, we would have seen a very different tale of how the 16-bit era played out. I'm gonna give it to you though. I want to hear you talk about Nintendo's gray and purple beast and show me how it's better than the Genesis.
Here's the thing, and if you want to bring that up, if you want to bring up the concept that the Super Nintendo, it's all about how it looks, how it looks ugly compared to the Sega Genesis. First off, I feel like Sega Genesis fans are the most superficial human beings on the planet. First off, you only care about the blood in Mortal Kombat, not about anything else. The control, the button placement, any of that. It's better on Super Nintendo that way. All you care about is a blood, which isn't even openly available. You have to put in a code. On top of that, you look at the pack-in titles, all right? The original pack-in title for the Sega Genesis was Altered Beast. Need I say more? The original and mostly it was the pack-in title for most of the generation was Super Mario World, which is often considered one of the best Mario games of all time. Compare that to the pack-in and that would eventually happen with the Sega Genesis, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which, comparing that to Super Mario World, you can have a debate there, but overall, Super Mario World, you get much more bang for your buck compared to, at the very least, Sonic 1. Like, I grew up with Sonic 1, but Jesus Christ, man, that thing is like, compared to Mario World, Sonic 1 feels more like it was competing with the NES platformers at the time, not the big boy 16-bit platformers at the time. But I digress. You have some of the most influential games of all time, games that just inspired generations upon generations of games on the Super Nintendo, where the Sega Genesis feels like it just kind of was playing catch-up and was just kind of giving you the Sega Genesis version of a lot of stuff. Super Nintendo had Final Fight, so you got Streets of Rage, baby Streets of Rage. Who cares? What? Like, the only one people care about there is Streets of Rage 2. Streets of Rage 3, you play as a dumbass kangaroo. Who cares? Streets of Rage 1, I don't hear anybody talking about Streets of Rage 1 anymore. Final Fight, you have 3 Final Fight games. The first one, pretty much arcade perfect, outside of not being able to play as Guy.
Oh yeah, they had to release
Who
that
cares
as
about
a
Guy
separate
anyways?
game.
You ended up getting him in a Blockbuster. Yeah, but you got him anyways. You got it on the Super Nintendo anyway, so who cares? But you have kind of the trifecta of Nintendo published games, often considered some of the best in their franchise. You have The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, but then you have the birth of such franchises as Donkey Kong Country, which spat a big fat loogie in the face to Sega when they were trying to push these expensive ass add-ons like the Sega CD and 32X. You were getting better looking graphics in Donkey Kong Country than something like, who cares, Star Wars Arcade on 32X. Doom just had the full soundtrack on the Super Nintendo cartridge when the Sega 32X version of the game sounded like ass. It sounded horrible. There was nothing to that soundtrack. And then you had games coming out near the end of the life cycle when Sega and Sony had to put out new consoles, and Nintendo was showing, hey, we're doing stuff that's nearly as impressive as these 32-bit consoles on this 16-bit one. Yoshi's Island has these crazy 3D effects and these warping transitions and all of this stuff that's just so impressive. Super Mario Kart laid the foundation for the kart racing genre, and then you had just garbage on the Sega Genesis, like virtual racing for $100 back then? Who remembers virtual racing? Well, you will still find people. You will still find people. Yeah, do you want to play virtual racing right now? Well, Super Mario Kart, there's tons of people. I don't consider them people because I don't get them, but they'll still play Super Mario Kart and consider that to be their favorite in the franchise. I don't understand how they're still human beings, but they still exist out there. And then you have RPGs that have stood the test of time, such as Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 2 and 3, or more so 4 and 6. And then you have Secret of Mana and ActRaiser, which is not really an RPG, but still, it's an interesting game. And then, but Super Mario RPG. Then you also have Mario All Stars, which laid the foundation for remakes. There was no remakes like there were Super Mario All-Stars until Super Mario All-Stars released, including Ninja Gaiden Trilogy. But then what did you get on Sega Genesis? Baby Boy Mega Man The Wily Wars, which didn't even release on a cartridge over here. It released on the Sega channel, which nobody even played. Nintendo knew this was not going to do well, so they were just like, no, we're not even going to subject North American gamers to this stuff. We're just going to leave the Satellaview in Japan, because nobody cares about these streamed whatever radio wave games, whatever it was back then. But then you had the racing genre redefined with F-Zero, Mega Man X, Super Castlevania 4. All of these games were upgrades on the Super Nintendo. They were like, wow, finally, these games are massive now, where the Sega Genesis got these Dumbo, whatever, Sega Genesis-ized versions of these games with Castlevania Bloodlines, which nobody talks about, Mega Man The Wily Wars, nobody cares about, Contra Hardcore, you play as a wolf in that game, who cares? There's so many things with Super Nintendo. And then there's also just the gimmicky games, like the Super Scope games. Even though nobody cares about them, nobody talks about Sega Menacer games. And then you have Mario Paint, which Sega tried to rip off with Artist Alive and Wacky World Sonic Creative Studio, whatever it's called. Like, Mario Paint was the defining Paint-like game. And then even if you want to defend the Sega Genesis with stuff like Mean Bean Machine, we got our own Mean Bean Machine with Kirby's Avalanche, which, wow, wouldn't you know, it's the same damn game. I'll leave it there, all right? Do you have any rebuttal? Any rebuttal there?
You want to talk about crazy accessories? Yeah, okay. Sega also had their own, but you had the Sega Activator, which, if you want to talk about ridiculous accessories, you could stand in the middle of like a hexagon and play Street Fighter with it. I actually did this back in the day. I had a friend that had this, and it's a memory that sticks with you. That's all I'm gonna say. But you make it sound like every Sega game is small, and you clearly, Scott, you haven't even touched Phantasy Star 4. I'm gonna bring it up every time someone says that there's no big games on the Genesis. 3 planets that fully open for you to explore, multiple races, tons of characters, crossover techniques, a 50 to 60 hour story. This was like one of the biggest RPGs of all time. when it came out. It still stands up against modern RPGs, and I would say it's better than 90% of the stuff on the Super Nintendo. I mean, you threw an ActRaiser in that list, which, come on. Like, Phantasy Star is so much better than most of those games.
I got 3 words as a response for you right here. Kirby's Dream Course. All right.
Oh, come on.
You don't even have anything similar to that on the Sega Genesis. Name a single golf game with Kirby in it on the Sega Genesis. You can't.
Yeah, well,
It's impossible.
You got me there. But you talked about Final Fight. Sega had Final Fight CD. It had everything in it. It had an arcade perfect soundtrack.
You had to
It didn't
buy
have to offload a character.
$5 million CD add-on for that? No,
I'll
you
take
got
the
that
CD
straight
add-on.
on the cartridge.
I'll take that CD add-on over buying 2 copies of the same game to get all 3 characters in it. Come on, there's no way. Shinobi, you didn't have anything like Shinobi, and we got 3 of them on the
Harvest
on the Sega
Moon.
Genesis.
We got Harvest Moon.
Oh, come on.
That's the Super Nintendo's answer to Shinobi.
That is like the most hipster move. Harvest Moon was there before it was cool.
You got so many. You got such a big variety of games on the Super Nintendo, whereas on the Sega Genesis, it was mainly a sports game console. Who cares?
What?
You got mainly sports games. Joe Montana football? Really?
You mean
Really,
those
you're gonna
things
pull
that
that
were
out?
considered system sellers back in the day, right?
That's your ace in the sleeve? That's your ace in the sleeve, Joe Montana football? I don't think so. Well, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker? Well, you have to depend on licensed stuff like that. You have to depend on McDonald's Treasureland Adventures or anything like that. Super Nintendo didn't have to deal with any of that kind of stuff. Super Nintendo had unique, original games. All they had to depend on is the Tetris license, which they had numerous Tetris games, including Tetris Attack, one of the best puzzle games of all time. And Sega Genesis had columns?
Hey!
They didn't even have columns 2. They had columns 1 and 3. They didn't even have columns 2. They were too scared. They were scared to do something like that.
We had Golden Axe, Gunstar Heroes. We had if Echo the Dolphin is your thing. I never understood the popularity of Echo the Dolphin, but
There we go.
there's
Super
people
Nintendo
that
1.
enjoy it. We had the better version of Aladdin. Like, Aladdin on the Genesis was way better than Aladdin on the Super NES. I will not take questions on this.
What about Turtles in Time compared to the Hyperstone Heist?
Oh, that's just now you're just playing dirty.
That's dirty, yeah. That's right. I don't know. There, you always have that Super Nintendo version of a Sega Genesis game, and even if you consider that's an opinion, that Disney's Aladdin is better on the Sega Genesis compared to the Super Nintendo, but there's a reason. Have you heard of a little thing called the Disney Classic Games Collection, released for the Nintendo Switch in 2019? Originally, it only included the Virgin Interactive versions of those games, Disney's Aladdin and The Lion King. And they had riots outside of their company's headquarters. Riots for 3 years straight, waiting for the Capcom Disney's Aladdin on the Super Nintendo to be included in that game. And they finally did. They answered everybody's prayers, and they added that later. They added that recently into that game as DLC and in a re-release. So you're trying to tell me that nobody wanted those games when they succumbed to fan demand to include those games? People love those games. They specifically docked points from that compilation because the Super Nintendo version wasn't there. And they wouldn't do that unless it was the definitive version. The Super Nintendo version of Aladdin. The definitive version of Disney's Aladdin. That's right. That's right. Nothing to say. Nothing to say.
We're not going to disagree on that. Tell me what.
3 Donkey Kong games.
We got Game Freak making an original IP on the Genesis. Where's Game Freak's original IP for the Super
Mario
Nintendo?
And Wario. That's for Super Famicom. I'll give you that. That's for Super Famicom, but you can probably find some reproduction cards for the Super Nintendo, fully localized for our systems. So,
well, yeah,
I don't
but
know
then you're in Wily Wars territory. I mean, this console. I mean, you had an objectively. Where's Strider on the SNES? Did that even come out on the SNES? Did Capcom just skip the Super Nintendo with that?
That came out on the NES because it was perfect on the NES the way it was. They didn't have to do anything like that. Sega, you might have had Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. We got Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse, which was quite the game. 8 even got ported to the Game Boy Advance. That shows that there was demand for those games to come back. People love those games. Fighting games. You had Killer Instinct. You had all the Street Fighter 2s you could imagine
You
back
had those
in the day.
on Genesis,
Maybe not
too.
Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Yes, but you didn't have Killer Instinct. You had Mortal Kombat 1 through 3 on Super Nintendo, with the blood eventually in the superior games, which is 2. You got the blood in that game. You got the blood
give
in
you that
3.
you got blood.
You got it all.
But we already had we had that from 1 on the Genesis. We had every game with its original fatalities intact on the Genesis. I mean, we haven't even touched on the
But
fact
you
that we
had
got
to be in the know.
Sonic
You had
2,
to be in the know with the
Sonic
blood
3,
code.
and Knuckles ABAC. Who doesn't know the blood code for Mortal Kombat?
We got 3 Mega Man X games.
Well,
Three of them.
We got Vector Man.
3.
That's like Sega Genesis.
Nobody cares about Vector Man. That's always like, oh man, I bought a Sega Genesis collection. Oh man, what is it? Vector Man 1 and 2 included as per usual. And then what are you going to do? You're going to look at it on the select screen and you're going to go to Sonic like you always do.
Hey,
nobody has an urge to play Vector Man.
No, there are some mind-bending 3D effects that play in that game. If you're impressed by the visuals of Donkey Kong Country, you have to put some respect on Vector Man's name. He's doing the same thing. The same thing.
Vector Man is a fraud.
What?
Nobody cares about him anymore. You got the Super Star Wars trilogy on Super Nintendo. I don't even think you got a Star Wars game on the Genesis. I don't even care about Star Wars. There you go. I'm defending that. So there you go. What about you?
We got Toe Jam and Earl, which introduced you to what it must be like to be high.
We got Earthbound, which made you think what it must be to be drunk. So I'll give you that. But we got the alcoholism in the form of a game. If you go through Earthbound, you will find some mind-bending stuff in that game. And nobody even played it on Super Nintendo back in the day because they had too damn much to play.
Oh.
Because there was so much going on that Earthbound failed.
I'm sorry. I was busy sinking hundreds of hours into Shining Force 2, Phantasy Star, not to mention trying to get every single thing in Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. And then going back.
What were you getting in Sonic 1? The Chaos Emeralds? Wow, you wasted your time.
That was
just, you could have been doing so much more beneficial stuff for society back then, but you were wasting your time getting the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 1. And you know what? You don't even have to waste your time doing that in Sonic 2 and 3, because you can just you can just go into debug mode, or you can just put in the stage select code, you can do some codes, and you get Supersonic that way.
Well, I mean, that's cheating. That's cheating. You gotta earn.
Saving. Tell me how you saved your progress in Sonic 2. I'll wait. Right?
Listen, yeah, it was a different time. You were meant to play through these games in one sitting. We got Comic Zone.
I'll give you that. Comic Zone is fantastic, but you got so many other great art styles on the Super Nintendo. Kirby's Dream Land 3? That already looks like it's painted and hand-drawn. Alright, you don't need Comic Zone because you already got that on Super Nintendo with Kirby's Dream Land 3. You got an abundance of Kirby-related software on the Super Nintendo. Superstar, Dream Course, Avalanche, Dreamland 3? Like, that's too much. That's too much. I'll give you that. I will give you that. The Super Nintendo had too much Kirby. Which, oh, wait, that's not a bad thing. Wow.
What about, name for me a better animated game on the system, on the SNES, than Beyond Oasis. Beyond Oasis was one of the most visually impressive games to come out of the entire generation, and it was exclusive.
There was so much support for the Super Nintendo. Way into the N64 lifespan. I just mentioned Kirby's Dream Land 3. That came out in like 1997. 97! That was Mario Kart 64 was already out.
Yeah.
And then you also have stuff like Mega Man and Bass, which may have been Japan exclusive, but you can find reproduction cards for the Super Nintendo. And that came out in like 98! 98! When the Sega Saturn was well underway. The Sega Saturn got Mega Man 8, and the Super Nintendo got basically the Mega Man 8 game themselves, but, you know, it's different. You know, it's basically the companion title to Mega Man 8. And they got that. Why didn't the Sega Genesis get something like that?
That's because Sega knows when to cut ties and focus on the future. They knew that it was time to start thinking about the 32-bit era. Nintendo was still dragging their heels, trying to get people to bolster their flagging N64 sales with 16-bit games. So I just think that, Sega just knew when to cut and run. They knew when to end something's support so that they could focus on the next big thing.
Well, to end my debate here, we got literally all the RPGs. You're giving these nonsense suggestions like Beyond Oasis, Shining Force. We got the ones that matter, the ones that people are still playing and talking about today. If Sega announced that Shining Force was going to get like pixel remasters at E3 2021, and it was only coming to PC and mobile, nobody would have batted an eye. Everybody would have been like, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. But everybody was absolutely Steve. I saw you freak out. I saw you just pound your fist down on the pavement, going across the country, screaming at the top of your lungs how much you are just disgruntled over the fact that those games were exclusive to PC and mobile at launch. Overall, I think the Super Nintendo has the definitive lineup, the definitive controller, the definitive graphics, the definitive everything. You may think that it looks worse than the Sega Genesis from a console design standpoint, but I think you are a superficial freak who only cares about looks and blood in your games.
Wow. So
I will end it there.
You know what, man? First off, let's just call you what you are, which is clearly someone who just chooses to follow the mainstream. I can't believe you're such a sheep, Scott. We've known each other for a long time, and your true colors are finally showing through. And apparently those colors are gray and purple. God. But
I'm colorblind, so I don't care. It doesn't even matter to me.
The Genesis has such a wide variety of games that are just underrated gems. Nintendo clearly won the marketing war of the 16-bit era. It's all you'd hear about on TV. Sega had some great hits with their ads, but there were so many games that people haven't had a chance to try. Don't feel like smoking? Try Toe Jam and Earl. You could probably get the same experience there. Streets of Rage is a fantastic side-scrolling beat-em-up. Comic Zone is a unique take on the genre that was never repeated again and is stranded, in weird Genesis collections that nobody really tries. I'll give you that people just go to Sonic and they don't play any of the other amazing stuff. Kid Chameleon, another really underrated platformer that was super weird, had like 100 levels to it. Their Phantasy Star 4, one of the defining RPGs of the 16-bit era, one that woefully few people have played. You've got Gunstar Heroes, which somehow finds its way onto Nintendo consoles these days more than any other platform because Super NES fans missed out on that amazing game. You have the best version of Aladdin. You have, again, Mortal Kombat. Yeah, we got blood, but you got the arcade perfect port of Final Fight. If you want CD quality audio, and I get it, Genesis didn't have the best audio, but then the Sega CD came in and fixed that. Sonic CD has one of the best sounding soundtracks of all time, let alone just the 16-bit era. There are so many amazing games, and if you're a fan in 2022, you've already played the SNES. What are you waiting for? Go back, play some Genesis games, culture yourself, learn about the history of games. This is what you should be doing instead of playing Super Mario World for the 158th time. It's not going to change. They're not releasing DLC. Go play something new. Sheeple, wake up. Just wake up.
We got SimCity. we got that. Okay, so I think we've made our debate clear. And we can let other people decide what they think, they think had the better defense. But I think we should end it here by saying, what do you actually prefer?
Oh, absolutely the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I love the Sega Genesis, and even then, most of my arguments made no fucking sense.